A pleasant good morning to you, our viewer. This is the breakfast show that comes to your screen every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday right here at Camnet TV, where we discuss nothing but the best in politics, economic, health matters, sports, and everything that you want to hear. If you want to hear information with regards to that, this is a program that you have to tune in and listen. And of course, if you want to make a contribution, this is a program that allows you to go through and make your contribution. And today on a Friday, always, we speak nothing but business. What is it that is happening in the business segment? So stay tuned to Camnet TV, even as we get to discuss deeper on this issue. But of course, my name is Prudence Chota, and I am your host today. And I'm not, of course, alone. I am joined by a very beautiful lady who's going to greet you, our viewer.
Yes, good morning to our viewers out there. So stay tuned, and at 7:30 when we open the phone lines, we're going to expect your calls as we discuss the trending issue of the situation in Ukraine. What does it mean for our economy? But of course, Prudence, before we start our productive Friday, I think it's time for us to stretch a little bit. So with that, let's have the morning boost.
Good morning and welcome to our morning breakfast, and this is the Morning Boost, and I am your presenter, Isaac Matsa. I am here so that we can be able to do a warm-up exercise together just before you go about your day. All right, as usual, we are going to start with a warm-up. There we go, warm-up. 1 minute warm-up. After that, we'll be able to do some mountain climbers. Just that. For a minute. Let's go. How was your night? Say something so that we know where you're watching us from. If you're watching via Facebook, let's go. By the way, this is what I'm doing. See that? That's the workout all together. You're going to feel your calves actually. You're going to feel your legs. 1 minute warm up. Let's go. And let's change to the warm up. That trotting. Go. 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 Down with the warm up. Getting into a wake up now. Let's go. Faster. Faster. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. All right. That's it. Today, we're going to do something different. Let's do this now. Go down. Lay flat. It's a 3-minute workout. Bring in your leg out, in, out, okay? In, out, in, out. That's the workout you're going to do now. So you come here, go down, body posture like that. Let's go. 1, 2. Let's work on the tummy. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's your first 10. So I'm going to do another 10. Let's go. Same thing. Down, straight up, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you're doing it correctly, you're going to feel your arms. 10. Okay. So that's 20. I have 2 more sets. Remember, just 5 minutes every morning. That's all you need. Okay, 3rd set. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. You should feel your arms. 4, and the belly. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that's my third set. I'm gonna do the fourth one now. So that's gonna be 40. So I'm working on the tummy, also strengthening my arms. Let's go, last 10. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 40. So I've worked on my triceps and biceps, burning fat on the arms and the tummy as well. Okay, so the same workout. This time I'm going to do it faster. Remember, it's a 3-minute workout. Okay, so I'm good. 1 minute now. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, let's cool down. So try that. After you come back home, try to do those workouts. And they're going to work out for you perfectly. So this is very good for you every time you do that. So let's do now a cooling down now. Easy. Easy. You've done the workout already. Easy. Thank you so much. This is Isaac Matsa, and I'm going to see you again. Stay blessed and stay fit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you have exercised this morning. I always emphasize when I come on this program to say it is very important for you to keep fit, and that can only be done through exercising. Zipporah, I don't know if you exercise in the morning.
Yes, I do, and that's a very good routine. I think now we've followed it very well. Now know how to go about it. It just helps us start our day on a very energized note.
No, very important. Yeah, of course. On this program, we always say that we bring you nothing but the best, and right about now, we are going to go into our health segment, and we will be having Dr. Nancy Mbasela, who's going to be discussing
who's going to help us with rheumatic
heart disease. Yes, that word is important. I don't know if you even have an idea what rheumatic heart disease is.
I think maybe basically where you have like a murmuring sound at your heart, something like that. So people usually have those conditions. Maybe they're born with those same heart conditions. So people usually have like a murmuring sound at the heart. So I'm sure, the doctor will help us understand more. And when we come back, I'm sure we're going to discuss more in detail.
Of course. So let's get to listen to what the doctors have to say about this condition before we mislead you. Let's get it from the experts.
Good morning, our viewers, and welcome to the health segment once again. We are happy to bring to you, to your screen, the Health Talk, and it's proudly brought by the Medical Women Association of Zambia. To host you today, I'm Dr. Chelo Mwanza, your baby doctor from the National Heart Hospital. From Monday up to today, we have been talking about congenital heart diseases. So these are defects in the heart that children are born with that present in various ways. We talked about the pink and the blue babies. We talked about those children that present with hypertension because of the defect in the blood vessels where the blood passes. And so today we will talk about something slightly different, something that a child might not be born with, but something that occurs along the way, and your child gets to have a problem with their heart, or their heart gets sick. So today we're going to talk about rheumatic heart disease. In short, we call it RHD. We've come across so many parents, so many guardians, complain about their children having sore throats, in and out of hospital because of the same. You need to remember this, even as we go through this talk, that a sore throat can lead to a broken heart. Remember this all the time when your child complains of a sore throat, that sore throat can cause a broken heart. So this RHD actually is a complication of a child having had a number of sore throats that were not treated properly. I know you may not be able to look at your child's throat to see if there's any, disease going on there or an infection. But the thing you can do, if your child complains about pain on their throat, complains about, pain when they are swallowing, your child is vomiting, your child has body hotness, you may want to see your doctor, because a sore throat can lead to a broken heart. So you see that a number of children, when they start going to school, they'll have a lot of, they'll present with fever most of the time. So body hotness, they'll be coughing, they'll be complaining about pain when they're swallowing. So all those might be an indication that your child might have a sore throat. So what do we do if your child has a sore throat or has a fever, is vomiting, is failing to eat well? You need to go to your nearest health center, because a health worker needs to look at your baby's throat. Remember, a sore throat can lead to a broken heart. And we've also noted that, because my neighbor's child had a sore throat and they were given this medication, and you want to do the same. We want to appeal to you, our viewers, that it doesn't mean that you need to self-medicate your child, because your child needs proper medication for their sore throat so that their heart does not get damaged. So I know sometimes it's a bit difficult, because sometimes we do give drugs that last for a very long time. I know 10 days is not an easy thing to be taking your medication, but those drugs we give are very potent, they are very powerful. They can actually cure that sore throat without causing any damage to your heart. So when your child has a sore throat and is improperly treated, what I mean is that you don't give them the correct medication. Let's say maybe you just went and bought from a chemist. You don't give them for the required number of days because you didn't buy enough medication. So that sore throat is not properly treated, and because of the way the body responds to that sore throat, they might end up having effects on their heart. So what you need to look out if your child has been having a number of these sore throats is, does this child continue to have body hotness? Does this child start to complain about, pain in their joints, be it in the knees, be it on their hands, their wrists, be it on their back, be it on their feet? Does this child complain of any pain around any joint, or even is there any swelling? Does this child complain about, especially for the older children, complain about their heart pumping very fast, or them being aware of their heart pumping? I know usually, we're not aware. The heart does its job and we're not aware. We're happily going about our day. But when your child starts to be aware of their heart pumping very fast, then maybe there could be a problem with the heart. You need to see the doctor, because that's the beginning of what we call the RHD, the rheumatic heart disease. And if at that point your child is not given the correct treatment, it may lead to a broken heart still. So from there, if this child is not properly treated, now the heart gets the disease. At this point, the heart, from the two chambers, the upper chambers going into the two lower chambers, there are valves there, so that blood does not flow back when it's being pumped out to go into the other blood vessels to go to the rest of the body. So the first one actually that gets to be affected is the one on the left side. So if that happens, it means that your child's blood, instead of being pumped forward, will start flowing backwards, simply because the valve of that particular heart is not working well. And at that point, we might be going towards the end of the disease, which we don't want to get to. So what are some of the complications? To start with, any part of the body that overworks will eventually fail. So if the heart is going to be overworking, because now instead of this blood being pumped forward, it starts flowing backward, it means it's doing more work than it's supposed to. So to start with, the heart itself will fail. After that, if your child has a poor dental hygiene, they're going to get a number of infections, and these infections will also end up on their heart. Again, the heart will be hit in a different way. This is a heart that's already sick, and again there's this other infection because this child has not taken care of their teeth properly. You know, that gives the heart even more work to do. So we don't want that to happen to the heart. The brain might be affected as well. You know, it's like there's a very nice connection between the brain and the heart. You know, whatever affects the heart most of the time also affects the brain. So because of, you know, what we call clots, which might form because the heart is not pumping well, these clots might be thrown to the brain, and your child might have a stroke from just a sore throat. You can see, you know, the cascade. It moves from a throat to the heart and now even to the brain. So our message out there is a sore throat can lead to a broken heart. If you are going to forget everything that I have said today, remember that a sore throat can lead to a broken heart. So let's have our children with sore throats being treated adequately with the right medication at the right time before they get a broken heart. Just a reminder again is, do not shun to have your child screened if you are concerned about their health, because it's only through screening that you're going to get the correct treatment and medication. I should add on to say, if we reach, you know, at the end stage of the rheumatic heart disease, where now the valves are so sick that they cannot pump this blood properly, the blood starts flow backwards, we can still give them the medication to help the heart pump properly. But at the end of the day, if this heart is so sick, your child may need surgery. Thank you for joining us today on the health segment, and remember, a sore throat can lead to a broken heart. This segment was brought to you by me, Dr. Chelo Mwanza, through the Medical Women Association of Zambia. Thank you.
All right, I hope we have learned something from what the doctor said. So that was Dr. Chelo Mwanza. At the beginning, I did mention that Dr. Nancy Mbasela, I could like to make that mistake. This is Dr. Chelo Mwanza. He was a pediatric senior registrar at the National Heart Disease. And of course, she's highlighted a very important, points, Zipporah, that sometimes we overlook as parents. And that's the fact that she's mentioned that sore throats can lead to a broken heart. You know that I've really learned a lot. I didn't really know that. And these are some of the small things we ignore to check things like sore throats on our children. We usually just think, oyu mwana oyavuto, oyu mwana siyafuna kudya.
Yeah, so it can actually, that's why it's important to always emphasize on going to the hospital instead of self-medication, because for many people, if the child has got a sore throat, maybe they'll go and get cough medicine, but that may not actually be the case. So I've always been discouraged against self-medication. And another thing was about the heart beating fast. If your child is complaining about the heart beating fast in a way that they are aware, that should be already a red flag.
Yeah. So if you have any questions for the doctors, they are live every Saturday in studio, and they respond to some of the topics that were discussed during the course of the week. So if there's something that you've learned and you would like to ask, just stay tuned to Camnet TV on Saturday morning, and the doctor will be in studio to respond to those questions that you have pressing. Then also, let me make mention to say, doctor, the program is up for grab for sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor that program, just contact Camnet TV. It's always important for us to keep talking about health issues that affect us every day, but in order to do that, we need to support the program. So this program is up for grab to everyone who would like to sponsor the doctor's program on Camnet TV in the morning, so that we can keep discussing these topics. Zipporah.
Yes, definitely. Just before we jump into our day, it's now time for the money market, so that we can give our viewers a true picture of what the kwacha how the kwacha is performing right now. So we can start the day. So we have the Great British Pound, which is buying at 23 kwacha 44 ngwe, selling at 23 kwacha 88 ngwe. We have the United States dollar, which is buying at 17 kwacha 53 ngwe, selling at 17 kwacha 86 ngwe. We have the euro, which is buying at 18 kwacha 89 ngwe, selling at 19 kwacha 26 ngwe. The South African rand, which is buying at 1 kwacha 14 ngwe, and selling at 1 kwacha 16 ngwe. So that's your money market for today.
Very important.
What do you think about the performance of the kwacha recently? Like they've seen it's on 17, maybe compared to the past. Do you feel like maybe we're on the right path, especially with the issues that are coming, like the same topic we're about to talk about?
Yeah, so that's why I was even about to say, let me not comment much. Let's wait to have an expert on the program. Of course, today we are expecting someone very important who's going to help us discuss the topic. I hope we can ask him, Zipporah, some of these questions. What we should always know is that they say when the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. So we've seen some great nations such as Russia and Ukraine currently fighting, and you might be asking yourself, but what does that have to do with Zambia? This is a topic that we are bringing you to discuss today. And of course, we are going to expect you to make your contribution. So what you should know is the war that is happening between the two countries really has a negative impact on African countries. And Zambia is not an exception, because you should know that most of the fuel, Zipporah, that we depend on usually comes from outside. And wherever there is this conflict, it always triggers to oil. And just yesterday I was listening to news, and what I saw was that for the first time since 2014, the price of fuel has hit 100 United States dollars per barrel. Yes, that's what it is as now. This is the first time since 2014. So if you look at 2014 till now, this is a lot of time. And we have the oil price reach that. And we all know that the Energy Regulation Board now has announced that they'll be revising fuel price every month. So now if it is selling at 1,000 United States dollar per barrel, Zipporah, what is it that we expect for Zambia?
Yes, definitely. And yesterday we saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs actually speak to things that are happening in Ukraine. So this has got a lot of concern. This borders on many factors. And that's one thing that our stakeholders here in the energy sector have always been saying, stating that since Zambia is affected by prices on the changes on the international market, we should endeavor to maybe find alternatives to this to make sure that we're not affected. The other time I was talking to Dr. Charity Msamba from the University of Zambia, and she said one of the things is we have to enhance our oil reserves. Of course, we do have oil reserves, but she said we should enhance our oil reserves maybe for even 6 months, so that by the time maybe things are stabilizing on the international market, our people here in the meantime have got oil here and we're not really affected by the changes, so that we can at least alleviate poverty, which we already know is at over half of the population currently. That's
a very important point, Zipporah. Of course, that's what we should be looking at as a nation, looking at ways in which we can preserve fuel, even for up to 6 months, so that if such happens in our economy, we don't get affected. Maybe perhaps that's where a lot of people have debated to say, Ndeni had the capacity to do that, but unfortunately the government had to take a step because they said it is costly to the nation. So hopefully we see where this goes, but this is what we have to be talking about as a nation, Zipporah, looking at how is it that we can reserve our fuel to about even 4 months to 6 months than every month. You know, where every month when there is a change, we are equally affected. I think these are the alternatives that we have to be talking about. And these are the questions I think as journalists, Zipporah, we need to start asking our government. Are they considering doing things such as this so that we ensure that going forward, we don't get affected when the big elephants are fighting? And of course, this now brings me to a very important point where almost most of the economists we've been talking to are saying this is why as a country we need to start producing so that we can export to other neighboring African countries. You know, most of the raw materials that we export outside Zipporah goes to European countries and stuff like that, and like Switzerland. Switzerland is one of our largest country where we export. Yeah, we export a lot to Switzerland. We also do export to China. But what is it that we're exporting to our fellow African countries? So that if we have these wars happening outside, it does not affect us. This is where now we need to start playing a role as citizens to see how best that we can become an export-dependent country. And this begins with you and me making a difference.
Yes, and if you remember recently, we did cover a story in Shantumbu area where a company has actually begun manufacturing fuel locally using tires and plastic waste. So they were saying, wow, also reducing the waste in the environment. They're also producing fuel at the same time. And so basically these are some of the things that people actually have to start taking interest in. For example, our universities can, for example, start learning such things, so that in the long run we can improve and actually start producing our own fuel. Last time when we went there to do that story, they were saying 1 liter of fuel, when they produce there, it's actually like of good quality, and 1 liter can go even at 10 kwacha only, according to that company.
But right now we've seen a liter is above 20 kwacha.
So that's something that we have to take seriously, because we find that maybe such things, of course, it's in the news, then everything goes quiet. But with everything happening on the international market, those are some of the investments we have to start seriously looking at. And especially that it's also environmentally friendly. I think that's a plus. Okay.
So right about now, we are going to zoom into one of the headlines, the stories that made a headline yesterday, where the Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has announced that Zambia is going to start,
repatriating people.
The people who are in Ukraine, yes. Our own people, we've got students who are there, we've got workers who are working in Ukraine, and government says they are going to take a step. So we are going to zoom into that story so that we listen to what the minister said yesterday, even as we get to discuss the topic at hand.
Especially in the last 24 hours, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, the President of the Republic of Zambia, has made a decision to begin the evacuation process of citizens, of Zambian citizens in that country. As you may be aware, government had earlier indicated that we would continue to monitor the situation in Ukraine very closely, and that the Zambian embassy in Moscow has been in constant touch with our nationals regarding this issue as it unfolds. The public may also wish to note that we have 141 non-Zambians, most of them students, pursuing their studies in various cities across Ukraine. And following this regrettable latest development in the last 24 hours, the government has had to take this course of action in order to ensure safety of our nationals. The exercise is being coordinated by the relevant government machinery, and would like to take this opportunity also to assure the public, especially the students who are out there, and their respective parents, their guardians.
So there you have it. That's something that is trending right now. Many countries are actually repatriating their citizens. And this morning actually saw the Zambia National Students Union calling for the urgent repatriation of all students who are in Ukraine. So I don't know basically your thought on this move. Do you think it's a good move or?
I don't. It's a good move. It is a good move in a country where there is no uncertainty. You have to ensure that your people are safe. But the questions that a lot of people are asking is, how is it that government is going to do that, considering that airlines in that country have been closed? So how is it that government intends to repatriate these people without putting their lives at risk? And others were arguing to say, I think it has been done late. When other countries had already done that, we were observing. But of course, government has a way in which things are done. You know, when you have to repatriate people who are in different sectors, you can't just do it at once or in 1 day or 2 days. There are processes that have to be followed. So I think government has really been doing that. And hopefully what is important is that we see our brothers and sisters land back safely. That's very important. But as you heard, the minister did mention to say, others are students. We have about, is it 176, something like that, yes, a number of students who are studying in Ukraine. And we just hope nothing but the best for them to come back home safely. And when things are calm and stuff like that, they can go back and finish pursuing their programs. Others are doing medicine. I did see a parent yesterday who one of the child is doing medicine was complaining to say, I don't know what to do, but my child is out there. And I know this is a very difficult time for a parent. Imagine you are here, your child is very far in a country where there is war. And as a parent, it gives you a lot of unrest, zippor, and you are wondering, what is it that I'm going to do next? Is my child safe? What is it that my child is eating and stuff like that? But we wish them nothing but the best, even as government undertakes this process of ensuring that they come back home safely.
Yes, definitely. And just now, as we await our guests, we're just going to open the phone lines to hear your views on the matter. How do you think the Ukraine situation can best be approached? Maybe what effect do you think it can have on the economy? Because I know that many people watch us, economists and all that. So what is your thought? What are your thoughts on how Zambia can prevent the full impact of the war in Ukraine. Like, how can we reduce the war from having an impact here on the country? So I'm going to open the phone lines and expect your views on the matter.
Of course, Tipo. And right about now, we are going to take a short break. Stay tuned to Camnet TV, and we will be back on the other side. See you.
We still need more players, yes, because we need to balance the team. We need to have maybe on one position 3 or 4 players.
The third Camnet Stars football trial is on. This time, Camnet Stars are looking for young, talented and skilled soccer players between the age of 18 and 20 years old. Start your lucrative football career in Europe this July. If you know you are one of Zambia's best gifted soccer players, don't waste your time. On Sunday, the 12th March 2022, there will be trials for professional soccer stars. Venue, Kablonga Boys Secondary School grounds. Time, registration 13 hours. Kick-off 14 hours. 100 kwacha non-refundable shall be paid, and your birth records must be produced upon registration. Camnet Stars, setting football standards for international market.
Camnet TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Thank you so much for still staying tuned to Camnet TV Breakfast Show this morning. And of course on Friday, as I mentioned earlier, we speak nothing or discuss nothing but the best of what is happening in the business sector. But right about now, we know there's a big elephant that the whole world is currently talking about, and that is the war between Russia and Ukraine. And the question that we are asking ourselves this morning is, based on the unfolding conflict between Russia and Ukraine, what impact will this have on the Zambian economy? That is a topic of discussion. And of course, we have been joined by our guest, Mr. CHIMBAMBA KANYAMA, who's going to help us dig a little bit deeper into this topic and how is it that it is going to affect the Zambian economy. Sir, good morning.
Morning. Morning. Yeah, thank you. Nice to visit you today. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for making it to the program. And of course, maybe just to discuss a little bit about the war between the two countries. Maybe a lot of people are asking, how has this come about? So we would like to know from you, how have we arrived at Russia having to attack Ukraine first?
Well, I know that the world has heard of this for the first time, but it's something anticipated. Had been anticipated for the past, I would say, been anticipated since 2015. I know this because the U.S. government been aware about what we call the geopolitical elements within the European East. That's why Ukraine has received a lot of support in the past 9 years from the USA government, largely through the International Monetary Fund, through huge loans. These are loans that may be in billions, $66 billion US dollars, financed through the IMF. But much of that was to stop the incursion of Russia into Ukraine, because they anticipated this was a matter of time. Remember that now Putin is going for re-election, so he knows his rating may not be very favorable. So one way to do that, to improve his rating, is to do what he has been planning to do for a long time. But the excuse is to liberate some eastern parts of Ukraine, which they feel are part of Russia. This is a part of Ukraine. The population there is mainly Russian. They speak Russian, and the residents themselves in that area feel they should belong to Russia, and that's why I find that it has been very easy for them to penetrate those two particular cities. So Putin is using that excuse that under rebel horde, these are rebels who've been fighting Ukraine for the independence, to cede from Ukraine. And he's using that to make a huge incursion into Ukraine itself. But as you know, it's not really a fight for Ukraine itself. It's the way of Russia emancipating the former USSR. Remember that it was split. USSR had all these different countries that made USSR. And then 1989 and so forth, we saw the split of the creation of new countries, Kosovo and all Serbia and all these which came out of USSR. And I think he wants to have that dominance once again. So I see that Ukraine is just one of those he's targeting. He may be going to others.
To other countries. Yeah. I think that's why we've seen some, I'm told, airlines patrolling part of other countries that are near Ukraine to ensure that they are safe from whatever that is happening around the area. Maybe I think that's why they've decided to do that. But maybe just bringing it back home, what impact does this have on the Zambian economy?
It could be positive, it could be negative, but much of it could be direct impact. The other one is largely indirect impact. Let me start with the indirect because it all feeds from there. The war itself has an impact, an immediate impact, potential impact on inflation, global inflation. So when we say global inflation, with Zambia is not excluded, inflation basically is short supply on one hand, short supply of commodities, and on the other hand is short supply, some demand, and increasing demand due to panic, because when there is a war, people panic, they tend to hoard on supplies, so there's this unplanned higher levels of demand because of people hoarding. So the major factor here is oil. Russia is a big supplier of oil in Europe. So once you disturb the supply chain, we're already seeing the price of oil hitting more than $100 per barrel, which is very, very high.
The highest since 2014.
So the supply side is going to be affected. Depending on how the other country, the suppliers of oil react to this, there's already a shortage of supply of oil. That's automatic. And supply reduction in oil means that even the other suppliers in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and all others begin to see they have an opportunity to increase their price. So they'll be responding by increasing the price of fuel. So you don't be surprised when the Energy Regulation Board, in the next announcement of fuel prices, increases that. So you already anticipate that ERB will be increasing the price of fuel. And they have an opportunity to do that now because unlike before where they would wait for some time to increase prices, they do that adjustment every month. So we are going to be listening to them next week. The new price adjustments. And last month there was a reduction, and I anticipate they may hold it now. They may slightly hold it as a wait and see to avoid panic in Zambia. But I anticipate that there will be gradual increments in price of fuel in the country, and largely because of the supply, the supply factor on fuel, and this owes to the war. There are other indirect benefits. War is about bullets, and we know that Zambia copper is used, not Zambia copper alone, but well, a lot of things have changed in terms of how war is managed today. People use other forms of warheads and so forth, but still copper is used for bullets, and that's our major export. So whether it will really be used for that or not, you already anticipate the reaction by the global market, in the metal market, that they will hike the price. Whether the bullets will really go to the war or not, but because of panic, war is about uncertainty. And whenever there is uncertainty, people want to be ready for what will happen next. And the best way of being ready is to hold, to keep on the stock. And whenever people panic, those who supply the commodity begin to panic as well. So that's one thing that we may, unfortunately, we may benefit from. It's not a good thing that we're a supplier of copper, but that's a reality. I mean, that's a reality. There are other potential benefits. Remember that Ukraine is among the top 5 suppliers of key agricultural products in the world.
Okay.
Yeah, Ukraine. Almost every agricultural product is either number 5, number 7, number 5, number 7, and it's among the top suppliers. Almost everything, from tomato to onions to whatever, cabbage. Think about any product whatsoever you can think of. Ukraine is among the top 5. Now there'll be a huge disruption, and I know that China may want to come into here because it's the number 1, number 2 supplier in global market, so China may want to leverage this opportunity. Why not Zambia? You know, why not Zambia? We are not saying that we're going to supply to Ukraine, but Ukraine supplies Europe. So there'll be some huge supply gap in Europe, almost all the agricultural products. And there are certain areas where we've got an advantage. If our onions, you've been reporting on the onions lately, many farmers union coming in because we are about to lose 23 million worth of onions not bought. Why don't we think about Europe right now? And if we really are focusing on developing our economy, this is the time to understand the value chains and what will be impacted on and where are the gaps, where do we supply. And I feel that that is where lies an opportunity for Zambia. We're an agriculture-based country. This is a time to explore ZDA, which is prospecting for the country. It shouldn't only just be attracting investment in here, but also prospecting for potential markets out there. And there is a huge gap. So that is on the side of potential opportunities for this country. But there will be the downside too. The downside will come through sanctions. Biden is coming to throw sanctions against Russia, but these are selected sanctions and largely focusing on the financial sector. So the access to capital will be very difficult for Russian oligarchs and Russian industry itself. So there will be some disruption in the financial sector. And whenever you talk about disruption in the financial sector, the immediate reaction is the cost of money, cost of capital. And here we may win, we may lose as a country. Remember that the past 2 weeks, our exchange rate was really hit hard, and largely because of the rising interest rates in Europe, in the USA government. Because of high inflation in the USA, and the Federal Reserve in the USA said we want to manage inflation. We want to come down to the 2% from 5% where it is, and that arose from the stimulus packages. Okay, they threw money into the system. Now they have to get back that money from the system due to COVID. So the US government reacting and raising interest rates. What happens, therefore, is that most of the people who are investing in our country think of you investing in Europe. Now, there will be a shortage of money supply because of the Russian factor. The sanctions will lead to kind of, one, there will be a reduction, artificial reduction in demand for capital because Russia will undergo sanctions. On the other hand, there will be panic for the suppliers of capital. So we anticipate a rise in global interest rates. And you know what that means? Again, it's high inflation. So this is where it may impact us. I'm also sure which direction it will take for Zambia. It may be positive impact, where because now the country invests in Eastern Europe, most of the investors can't look into the European market now because of uncertainty, there's some geopolitical factor. They want to look at emerging markets, which are safer. So it may actually benefit us. You know, you may find that capital now would favor coming to Zambia. And this is an opportunity for us to see an appreciation in the exchange rate.
And maybe basically in terms of oil, do you feel that Zambia imports enough oil maybe to stop, to avoid being disrupted by sudden changes on the international market? Or how do you think we're currently doing importation? Do we need to maybe import larger quantities of oil?
I'm not an expert in the oil, how we do that in Zambia, but I know that there is a cycle, should be about 90-day cycle. So we may have that reserve for 90 days. Yeah, after that, perhaps we will have some challenges. But I know that we use the spot price. We don't hedge on the pricing. We use the spot price. Spot price means that we buy the oil as it is. Now, but those who hedge have bought the oil based on the future prices. So even if there is some fluctuations in the pricing, they still buy the price which was agreed on what we call either futures or the forward or option, whatever mechanism we have taken as a country in terms of hedging the pricing of crude oil. But Zambia is normally on the spot price. That's for reality. So it means that whatever market is, whatever price is there right now is the price we take.
Okay, don't you think the monthly revision of fuel price will cause uncertainty in the Zambian economy? I speak this to the fact that we've seen that now on the international market since 2014, you mentioned earlier to say fuel price has hit above $1,000 US per barrel. 100,000, yes. $100 dollars per barrel, yes.
Yeah.
But looking at the fact that the ERB will be revising fuel on 28th of this month, and you did mention to say there's a probability that fuel might be hiked. So this monthly revision, don't you think it's a little bit causing uncertainty in the economy?
It certainly does, and largely because almost every industry does annual budgets. So there are certain assumptions you make in your budgeting. You are anticipating certain things to remain within a certain range. You're anticipating that inflation will remain within a certain range. You're anticipating that the cost of money, interest rates, will remain within a certain range. You're also anticipating that the exchange rate within a certain range. And you look at your cost inputs, the cost of your inputs, and major inputs into any factory, into every business are largely labor and energy. These are major inputs. So you want to negotiate with your unions early to know, you are really projecting that if anything, the cost of labor will be within a certain range. So even if you don't tell the unions, you already have a figure in your budget that it may move around here. And also the cost of energy, you are anticipating to move around here. So you are planning the year. And this also helps in how you raise capital, how you plan your expansion and everything else. Now, my biggest worry is that this year's budget hinges on the private sector. If you look at its own theme, it will look at the recovery through private sector, recovery through private sector. And you don't want to impact on that projection on your GDP. Because to realize the GDP for a country, you want the private sector to take a very serious role. That's why the Minister of Finance gave us serious concessions this year's budget to the private sector to ensure that the private sector contributes to the anticipated GDP. Now, there are two things that may worry the private sector already. The first one, the monetary policy rate. I personally favor that action by the central bank to increase the monetary policy rate from 9% where it is today in November, from 8.0 to 9%, and to maintain it. I support that because the biggest devil we have to tackle is inflation. We have to bring down inflation. When we bring down inflation, automatically it has to affect the cost of money because banks will always want to lend above the inflation rate. So attack the inflation rate, and therefore you are impacting on the exchange rate too. But now, when you increase the cost of capital by monetary policy rate, the private sector is already crying foul. How much contribution are we going to make to the economy? So already they are impacted on that. But the cost of input on energy is already threatening growth. So it's already affecting expansion plan by many companies so far. There is a lot of uncertainty about monthly announcements of fuel. I know that last month ERB gave us some benefit, but I don't think that will be sustained for long. I know when you average, you'll find that there'll be more increases in a given year than there'll be reductions, and that creates uncertainty. So the previous years, government has more or less been subsidizing. They would average it out, and they'll say, what do you think will be the average cost of energy in a given year? So they'll give an increment, knowing that even if it increases, the crude oil prices increases the margin, we already pre-announced a higher price for fuel. So I don't have to announce over and over. We just give an average price increment so that I don't have to do it every month.
Every month. Okay, interesting. I did hear you correctly. You talked about the global inflation rate, which might be affected by the war between Ukraine and, of course, Russia. But yesterday, the Central Statistics did announce that our country's inflation has slowed down to 14.2 from, of course, I think that was 15.1 last month. Do you think this is sustainable, looking at what is happening on the other side? Well,
again, it hinges on the price of fuel. If ever the geopolitical issues of Russia and Ukraine are sustained for longer, I foresee that the price of fuel will go up. And like I said earlier on, the price of fuel is a key input into production and has a very direct impact on cost of prices. I mean, cost of goods and services, which is the price level. The central bank has really been monitoring that. I mean, of course, that is a function to monitor price level and manage that, and has done its very best through the monetary policy rate, but that is not sufficient for me. Once we see a trend of crude oil prices at the global level going up because of the same Russia, Ukraine, we will not continue for longer. And of course, this government is not for subsidy, and they will not enter the market to subsidize that. So inflation is very unpredictable. Already the exchange rate, as we know, it has been depreciating against the kwacha. We saw some marginal appreciation last week, and of course because of the participation of the central bank, but that is too unsustainable. Well, there are other factors as well. There are other things that are driving the exchange rate in terms of dollar inflow into this country. And depending on how it all happens, if the exchange rate doesn't favor us, we are going to experience imported inflation. Because, again, we're seeing down about 17, 18, whatever, it will start depreciating as we go on, and then we're importing things at higher prices and inflationary pressures. So right now, the Bank of Zambia is trying to balance the clutch plate and the fuel, whatever, system, to ensure that as much as you want to bring down inflation, you also don't want to see the exchange rate destabilize your kwacha.
This now brings me to this. We did see the Monetary Policy Committee last week announce a policy rate which they maintained at 9.0%. Looking at what has happened, do you think that was the best decision the Bank of Zambia took?
Of course. Anticipated that. I wasn't particularly surprised because you just announced a move in November. Now, you will play with two difficult situations as a Minister of Finance. Okay? The biggest devil you're facing is called inflation. And inflation has a huge impact on confidence. It has a huge impact on investment inflow. Has a huge impact on the true value of the money that you have. So you want to tackle inflation because it has an impact actually on the interest rate too. Because banks will never lend you money below the inflation rate. So the higher the inflation rate, the higher the cost of capital, and the more it impacts on the private sector. Of course, the private sector may not want to see that. Private sector is much more concerned about the cost of capital right now. So when the central bank announces monetary policy rate at 9% from 8.0%, okay, it worries a lot the private sector because immediately we are seeing the base rates being adjusted upwards. That's all they're seeing. But the Minister of Finance and the Governor are more focused on long-term cost of capital, bring down inflation to stabilize cost of capital and, of course, the exchange rate. Now, if we increase this time, where we are saying there's an increase in November and private sector still adjusting to that new trend, and at the same time we want to increase it, again, then it hurts your budget directly. It definitely hurts your budget. If you reduce, you are again pumping more liquidity into the system and inflation again begins to go up. So you don't want to see that. So maintaining it where it is the best way to go. And I think they should review it in the next announcement, perhaps increase it again.
A little bit.
With all these happenings, so do you feel like there's any hope of the kwacha being stabilized anytime soon, or maybe what should government do to make sure that the kwacha is at least stabilized, maybe even for like 6 months, so that you can see maybe a reduction even in the price of commodities?
The kwacha challenge is nothing to do with all this we have discussed here. The biggest kwacha challenge right now is that we have a very huge debt position. External debt very high. We have defaulted on coupons. And the investors, the European holders, are just waiting for the completion of the IMF EF's external credit facility, and which may take place in June. So they cannot pump money where there is this huge uncertainty about what will happen next. They're not too sure whether we shall succeed or we will not. Of course, the chances are that 98% will succeed, but there's still that doubt. Will all the creditors agree to restructuring? The biggest hurdle was China, which has now come on board to be the co-chair of the credit whatever. Now, okay, that hurdle has been overcome, but there still hinges a lot of uncertainty. A lot of the investors are actually monitoring Zambia right now. That I know 100%. They are monitoring the country. They are following the statements by the Minister of Finance, whatever action is being undertaken. And they cannot really pump money long term. As long as there is this uncertainty of what we shall do with our debt position. Now, we want to deal with the fiscal deficit too. These are the fundamental issues that we want to deal with. And as long as there is uncertainty on whether government will borrow or not, they know the budget, and they know that much of the budget will be financed by borrowing as well. And that induces uncertainty. And as long as uncertainty over debt exists, you see that the exchange rate remains unstable. Until we fix this problem, then you begin to see now there will be huge inflows of either portfolio investment or FDI. They begin to flow in. It's really about capital coming into the country. And that only happens when you have dealt with your economic fundamentals, about fiscal deficit, about debt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a country, how is it that we can prepare ourselves to cushion the economy in Zambia from the impact that we may experience from the war between Russia and Ukraine?
Number one, we should be forward-looking, forward-thinking. What is it that we can stock in advance? Are we able to stock as much crude oil as possible? That I don't know. I think you should call Dr. Johnston Chikwanda. He's really very good in that area. So you should call him on that, because that's our major danger. And two, let us exploit opportunities out there. There are gaps. Whenever war exists, there are certain gaps. You know, wherever there's a problem, there's a need. A country should not only focus on the problem, focus on the need. Are there gaps that are being created because of the war? And I've already explained here about the position of Ukraine being the major supplier of almost all the food products in Europe. Are there gaps that will exist now where Zambia can come in and fill? Of course, it's a very difficult thing to do because of the quotas and everything else that's involved, quality and so forth. But we already have some inroads for certain non-traditional exports. Why can't we expand supply? Why can't the Minister of Agriculture say, who are the major producers now? What can we do very quickly to recapitalize you to fill the gap in Europe? That's an opportunity we can have. So that's number one. And number two is enhance the levels of the negotiations. Zambia should not just sit and say we're a small country or a small economy. You know, yesterday I was just saying, you know, this is a time the world is missing our statesman, KK. You know, the world is missing his KK. I was just imagining him flying on QZ and now going to talk to Putin and going to talk to... but of course, he's not there anymore. And all I say is, who are our allies? Who can we talk to protect and kind of help us build a buffer? Do we have a relationship with Saudi Arabia and all the key suppliers of oil? This is the time to engage them. That, look, this is a war. We don't know how far it will go. We don't know how much it will impact us. But can we cement our relationship to ensure that the supply route of oil is not disturbed? Because once there is destabilization and that war spreads elsewhere, there will be disaster. It affects our budget big time, big time. And it will threaten employment opportunities for people. Yep.
That's how deep this issue is.
Absolutely. So it's a very deep issue. And also depending on how the sanctions are put in place, we may take advantage of that too. Maybe, we never know. Much of the capital now will move away from focusing on Europe, because this is where capital really moves. This is the central part of capital. Europe is the central part of Europe, of capital movements, financial capital. Given this destabilization, there is a huge opportunity that baby capital may go to emerging markets. The issue is how ready are we? Do we have any projects now where capital can move in? whether short-term capital, long-term capital. And personally, I'm focused on long-term capital. Where can we attract investment? Can we issue a paper bond, energy bond, or anything right now, and invite investors to participate? You know, this is a time when there is need for financial engineering. We've got great guys in this country who can really engineer products along the financial path and draw in capital from where it is running away to us. Why should it run away from Europe to Singapore or another? Why not Zambia? It's really about financial engineering. I know that many people don't think that we've got products in the financial area which can actually help boost this country. We can change the productivity possibility frontier right away by financial engineering. No, we've got young men like Cesar Suwale and others who can be put together by the Minister of Finance. So you guys, what can we do right now to attract capital into Zambia? It's moving away from Europe. Where is it going to go? What instrument, what vehicle, what product can we bring on board to attract this capital here? Yeah.
This brings me to this question. We do see always when the monetary policy is making these announcements, there is a little bit of concern with regards to the investment in government bonds and, of course, subscribing to government T-bills. There is that a little bit of a gap. Maybe why do you think this is a problem? And what is it that we can do to cover this gap? Because we have these bonds, of course, being given by the government, and we need people to subscribe. But there is less subscription.
Yeah, the recent one, there was an oversubscription, mainly because it was an oversubscription, not because there was higher supply per se. There was another oversubscription because the central bank didn't need that much money. In other words, government did not demand for that much money. They only wanted money sufficient to cover the maturing bonds or securities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's people saying, look, there was oversupply, that means the demand was very high. It's just because this time government didn't want to borrow for other use. They only wanted to borrow to meet the maturing securities. That's really it. So we had good participation, but it was really relative to how much was demanded. But to answer your question, it all depends on, again, the same geopolitical factors. It depends on what's happening globally. This is the treasury bill factor is one which attracts two players: international investors and local investors. Let's talk about the local investors. It has actually been the spoiler in growth. Treasury bill. Now, one thing that people should always be concerned about is the government deficit. That number is a very important number because it tells you about the available opportunity for a country to expand its GDP. So the higher the deficit, and we stood at about 10% last year, mainly due to COVID, 10–11% GDP. That is the space, the gap, the difference between what government gets in revenue and how much government spends. That space must be financed. It can either be financed by bilateral donors, creditors who finance government. It can be financed by borrowing, and that borrowing is through treasury bills, mainly through treasury bills. And of course, can borrow just direct borrowing from multilaterals, and whatever used in Zambia, and that has been the major thing, is government has been borrowing from market using government securities, bonds and treasury bills. But here is the problem. Whenever government enters the market to borrow, you have got the financial sector, the major pair, the major participant in this. They want to get there because government is considered a riskless asset. You know, government bonds are riskless assets. In other words, the potential for government to default very, very narrow. And you don't really have to do much when you are faced with two borrowers. Use government on one hand and a manufacturer on the other, a farmer who wants to expand. Here, now, this one, you don't really have to do the due diligence. Because due diligence itself, you have to commit resources. your best bankers to assess the potential of this project to make money, whether to default or not default. So government, you just need a treasury function. It's a treasury function. Just some guys at the back office in Central Bank and then at the commercial bank, they decide, and just two guys, and they put the money there. Okay, one guy does it for the whole bank. But when you're talking about lending to a farmer, the risks are enormous. Because of the risks and the potential to default, you compare the two where you lend the money. You lend to government. But if you have to lend to this guy, a farmer, you have to factor in the risks, potential losses. So the interest rate has to go up by 10 basis points. You are lending government at 19%, you are lending this guy at 30%. 30%. And this is where the problem is in this country. As long as government is entering the market to borrow, because of the high deficit, because of the indiscipline on the fiscal side, and I'm really talking about indiscipline, unable to control expenditure, you are penalizing your own country, because now this farmer will not produce anything. If they have to produce anything by borrowing, they have to pay a premium. This farmer will not grow, will not expand, will not create new jobs. And the real answer to all the economic challenges we are facing in this country goes back, it goes back to fiscal discipline. Government discipline has a direct impact on what happens on the growth of the country economic-wise. So you as journalists always watch this number. Whenever there's a high fiscal deficit, you must worry a lot. Because here we borrow, government borrows to consume at the expense of this producer who is borrowing to expand production, improve the value chain, and create new jobs.
Yes, and earlier, Mr. Kanyama, you did mention about how we can benefit through copper. Do you think Zambia is taking enough advantage of adding value to the products that we're exporting, especially in such times? How do you look at the value addition currently in Zambia?
I was here one time on this station, I think, with the Frank Mutubila ambassador, and I said, look, the copper industry is rigged in some sense. It's a rigged industry, but it shouldn't stop us from being creative. President Bonawasa went to Egypt in 2006, and there he saw his copper being used to produce transformers and wire cabling, everything, and he didn't know it was Zambian copper, and they asked, this is your copper from Zambia, and this is my copper which is produced, yes, and then he said, let me get this company to come to Zambia to invest, and he put together a team. I was part of that team. And we traveled to Egypt 3 times. We went to Sudan to see what this company has done everywhere. And finally it came into Zambia called El Sawidi. The question is, El Sawidi is in Zambia. What has it done with our copper? In the engine room, it still remains in Egypt. The creative, innovative capacity still remains in Egypt. The formula remains in Egypt. Okay? And the answer is that it's something that Zambia has to see, where do we have a competitive advantage? We can talk and talk and talk and talk and say we have to do value addition. We got Zamefa. What has happened to Zamefa? Zamefa is in existence, but it has struggled financially because of the Zamefa wire is more expensive than what you import manufactured elsewhere. So you talk about what is the role of government here. So government fiscal regime has to change if we are to facilitate that. Our own universities, what they teach our university students has to change so that we can now learn how to do value addition and above all everything else. And this is one thing that Zambia has not really answered adequately. I want to say this, I hope I won't hurt people. The biggest problem in Zambia, we think that almost everything is an engineering problem. And that's why we put it is that whoever has to be CEO of ZESCO must be an engineer. It's a lie. These entities are not facing an engineering problem. It is a financial problem. We've got engineers here, but without capital. They can't do anything without innovation. So what role is the financial engineer playing in Zambia? If you have to turn that copper into a finished product, I don't think it is an engineering problem. Our engineers can do it. It's a capital problem. What is the role of a financial guy? To engineer a product attract capital that will invest in value addition for copper. So once we attend to that, I think we have solved a big problem. And I'm emphasizing this because I'm seeing that engineers appear to have taken a very central role in this country for leadership. But it's not always true. That don't solve it. You know, there always exists a gap. We call it a financial gap. So companies like ZESCO don't necessarily need an engineer CEO. If you look at what's happening, they need a financial guy to lead ZESCO. And you see the kind of transformation that will happen in that entity. How the whole financial engineering will be done. So I thought I should say that.
Very, very important, important aspect there. Most of the time, I know we think because when you hear the name ZESCO, the first thing that comes to your mind is only engineer.
No, and that's why we're having those problems. Yeah, it's a capital financial problem, not engineering. We have a lot of them there, but the gaps are still existing. Not only ZESCO, but everywhere else. And I think that I'm provoking a situation for debate and discussion because we are looking at answers. You know, we are not creating jobs. Our economy is not growing at a rate we should be growing. You know, we have more people leaving universities and being unemployed. We need to unlock something. And unlocking that, we need to come to the table and have a reality check and say, where are we missing it? So we need a comprehensive response to the challenges that are facing this country.
Of course. That is Mr. Chimbamba Kanyama. And of course, we are discussing, based on the unfolding conflict between Russia and Ukraine, what impact will it have on the Zambian economy? I know most of us are just thinking Russia and Ukraine, this has got nothing to do with Zambia. But what we don't know is that this really has an impact on our economy, which Mr. Kanyama said might be positive, and at the other side might be negative. But if we take advantage of an opportunity, it can be beneficial to our economy. And of course, we've discussed what is it that the government has to do to ensure that we avoid, or rather we can't avoid it, but to ensure that the impact that this will have on our economy is minimized. So in case you're just tuning to Camnet TV, that was our topic of discussion. And of course we had Mr. Chimbamba Kanyama on the show, who we unfortunately have to let go. I know it has been a fruitful discussion and would like to have more of that. Maybe just before I allow you to go, what are your concluding remarks with regards to the topic of discussion this morning?
Well, I'll say that we are hoping that the Russia-Ukraine challenge will be resolved very quickly. It will have a huge destabilizing effect on the growth prospects of the whole world. On one hand, it will impact on the supply chain. And I'll say, even if there will be some residual benefits out of a war, it's really like being vouchers who celebrate death. I don't think that's the way we should be surviving. So I will pray that that issue is resolved very, very quickly. And as long as it takes place, our government must keep a very close eye to what's happening and develop the strategic alliances that are required.
Maybe just before I let you go, yesterday we did see the Minister of Foreign Affairs announced that they'll be repatriating our colleagues who are in Ukraine. Maybe, I know that's maybe the best decision that can be taken, but looking at the airlines being closed and all the uncertainty which is there, do you think this is the right thing that government can do? And maybe how can that be done to ensure that the lives of our brothers and sisters are safeguarded?
Yeah, the airports are being closed. So the best to do is government must take a much more proactive stance on it. Do what they did to our citizens in Ethiopia. Hire a jet, hire a plane, get one of the Ethiopian airlines, whatever, Emirates, to fly to Ukraine and bring the people here. Okay. And they responded well to Ethiopia, and they can do that. Sorry? With the airlines closed? No, they can actually hire. This is a chartered plane. They can charter planes, and, you know, even if there is war, there are still some allowances given to civilian planes for repatriation of citizens. They know how to do that in the aviation industry. They know how to do that. They know how to negotiate, to discuss, to allow for safe passage, and that can easily be done.
Of course.
Yeah.
I know that's a question that a lot of people had. Even yesterday, we did hear the comments where people were saying, I think it has been done very late. Our friends already did this and stuff like that. But I think you've cleared that to say there is always a way that the aviation authority can do that to ensure that those who are in war-torn countries are safely evacuated from those places. So this has been Mr. Chimbamba Kanyama. And of course, we had a very important topic of discussion of the effect that the war between Ukraine and Russia has on the Zambian economy. In case you've just joined us, this program was live on Facebook. You can just go through and hear what important discussion this was. But right about now, we'll have to release Mr. Chimbamba Kanyama because he has to attend to other pressing issues. So we are going to take a short break. And of course, we have another guest in studio where we are going to be discussing a very important topic. We know that housing deficit in Zambia has been a problem for quite some time. And this will be our next topic of discussion. We're going to be looking at the housing deficit that we have in the country and what is it that we need to do. We've seen overpopulation in some areas where last week I was chatting with my colleague and the colleague was telling me that there's a place where a family of, I don't know, 12 live in a one-roomed house where there's a mother and a father, their children and stuff like that. So we have this gap that has to be filled. So stay tuned to Camnet TV even as we get to discuss that in detail.
We still need more players, yes, because we need to balance the team. We need to have maybe on one position 3 or 4 players.
The third Camnet Stars football trial is on. This time, Camnet Stars are looking for young, talented and skilled soccer players between the age of 18 and 20 years old. Start your lucrative football career in Europe this July. If you know you are one of Zambia's best gifted soccer players, don't waste your time. On Sunday, the 12th March 2022, there will be trials for professional soccer stars. Venue, Kablonga Boys Secondary School grounds. Time, registration 13 hours. Kick-off 14 hours. 100 kwacha non-refundable shall be paid and your birth records must be produced upon registration. Camnet Stars, setting football standards for international market.
Camnet TV is becoming big and better. You can now watch Camnet TV wherever you are around the world, simply by downloading the Camnet TV app. With Camnet TV app, you only use less bundles. Camnet TV, not just another channel.
Lukalu, all the way from South Africa. You are watching Camnet channel, not just another channel. God bless you. Stay tuned. We celebrate for all you've done. We give you all the praise. Oh, we testify. We celebrate for all you've done. We give you all the praise.
We still need more players, yes, because we need to balance the team. We need to have maybe on one position 3 or 4 players.
The third Camnet Stars football trial is on. This time, Camnet Stars are looking for young, talented and skilled soccer players between the age of 18 and 20 years old. Start your lucrative football career in Europe this July. If you know you are one of Zambia's best gifted soccer players, don't waste your time. On Sunday, the 12th March 2022, there will be trials for professional soccer stars. Venue, Kablonga Boys Secondary School grounds. Time, registration 13 hours. Kick-off 14 hours. 100 kwacha non-refundable shall be paid and your birth records must be produced upon registration. Camnet Stars, setting football standards for international market.
Thank you so much for still staying tuned to Camnet TV. So earlier this morning, we had our guest, Mr. CHIMBAMBA KANYAMA, and we were discussing the impact that the war between Russia and Ukraine will have on the Zambian economy. And of course, it was a very fruitful discussion where we have learned the fact that Russia is one of the largest suppliers of oil in the country. And yesterday, when I was watching news, I did hear to the fact that the price of oil now is above 100,000 United States dollars per barrel. This is the highest since 2014. And so if you're asking what impact that will have on the Zambian economy, I think you have a question right about that now. And of course, Mr. CHIMBAMBA KANYAMA did say the war can also be have a positive impact on the Zambian economy, where we can, of course, take advantage because Ukraine is one of the largest suppliers of agriculture produce. So when there is this disruption, of course, we can take advantage. Perhaps it opens a window for us to look for something that we can export out there. So for everyone who's doubting or who still do not know what to do, I think we have to take as an opportunity. But of course, this will have a negative impact on many economies. So that was a topic of discussion. But even right about now, my colleague Zipporah, we have a very important guest in studio, and we are going to be discussing the topic on housing poverty. We know that Zambia has a challenge when it comes to housing. We've got a gap in terms of housing. We have a deficit. And of course, that has really impacted the development of our economy. So to discuss that topic, I have been joined by the Executive Director for Civic Forum on Housing and Habitat Zambia. That is Madam Grace Chikumo Mtonga. Good morning, Madam, and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, of course. So she is our guest this morning, and of course the topic of discussion, as I've mentioned earlier, is on housing poverty. So before we even get maybe to talk about the poverty housing that we have in our country, maybe Madam, you might tell us about the Civic Forum on Housing and Habitat. What is it?
Okay, so the Civic Forum on Housing and Habitat Zambia, it's a local NGO. We are supported by different funding partners. We do have a long-lasting financial support from WeEffect Zambia. This is under the CIDASIFS funding. We also have partnerships with Habitat International Coalition. We've also worked with different embassies who have supported our different works. We have also worked with different private sector entities like Barrick Lumwana. We did a community housing project with them. So basically, Civic Forum is a platform of non-governmental organizations that actually deal in issues of housing and human settlements. So the organization was established to actually provide a platform for organizations that were in the housing sector to be able to share knowledge and also to be able to interact and also come up with collective efforts towards addressing issues of housing poverty in Zambia. So the organization actually works under 3 strategic pillars. So we have pillar 1, where we look at issues of adequate housing and WASH. So basically this pillar, in terms of its focus areas, it looks at issues of civic engagements, for instance. How do people engage with their civic leaders to be able to demand for their entitlements with regards to housing rights? We also look at issues of water and sanitation. So we also do conduct surveys and research where we try to look at what is the status of housing. because certainly as we try to engage our development experts and colleagues, we need to have the actual figures and statistics. And we also try to look at what else could be done to improve the situation. Then we also do have the economic empowerment pillar and financial inclusion, because over the years we did realize to say housing is actually a capital investment category item. So for somebody to be able to build, they need to have some form of financial resources. But when you look at the dynamics currently in the country, you find that it's mostly the people that are in the lower income bracket that are actually struggling to have access to housing. So under the economic empowerment pillar, we do train our different target groups on enterprise development, savings and loans, and we also try to link them to financial institutions where probably they could get some form of financial assistance. Then we have the third pillar where we look at issues of land environment. Basically, this is a climate justice pillar where we try to make sure that our target groups are well informed about issues of climate change. If they have to get involved into anything to do with construction, what are the do's and don'ts? We also do facilitate the conducting of the environmental impact assessments, where we look at the short term, the medium term, and probably the long term effects of any activities. And basically, in terms of how we are structured, we have more of a rural membership-based organizations that we work with. So the rural areas, we all know that these are places where farming is the main thing for income generation. So we also try to expose our members to issues of climate smart farming methods. So basically that's what we do as an organization. And besides that, we try to facilitate engagements between our policymakers, the service providers, and also the communities, so that we try to create this formal social cohesion where people can be able to interact with the service providers and also the regulators.
Okay, that's great. And so maybe currently, what are your estimations of the housing deficits in the country? How does the picture look like out there?
Basically, in terms of the statistics, I think generally for the Zambian statistics, we've been depending more on the UN Habitat statistics. And the current statistics, actually, this is a figure that has been there from probably way back 2010 or 2012 when UN Habitat conducted the urban profile for Zambia. So at that time, what was the deficit was 1.5 million housing units. But I would want to believe that I think when you look at the rapid urbanization and also the rapid population growth, the housing deficit could be more than that. But what is on record is 1.5 million.
That's a huge number.
Indeed it is.
So, okay, maybe as a country, we had a slum upgrading strategy which expired without any tangible progress. So does that show seriousness as a country towards addressing housing challenges?
It is a very sad situation, and I think we want to also appeal to the new government. I think it's time we moved away from wasting a lot of time and resources working on plans that we actually failed to work with. We know the dynamics that have actually led to the proliferation of informal settlements or slums in Zambia. Lusaka alone, we have over 37 informal settlements spread across the city. And what you see in these communities, it's actually a deprivation of entitlements and human dignity. So the larger population of Lusaka is actually living in these informal settlements, because remember, about 70% of the urban population resides in these informal settlements. And these are places that only occupy about 20% of the total land surface area of the city. Then you have the Kablongas, you have all these up-class or elite areas that are only accommodate 30%, and yet they have they have 80% of land. So you can look at the inequalities. So from the organization's perspective as Civic Forum, it leaves us wondering, and we keep on asking ourselves questions: how really do we prioritize development in this country? Yes, the slum upgrading strategy was developed. But you see, you cannot have a strategy that is not accompanied by adequate resources. And already we have seen, I think, over the past 2 decades or so, the housing budget has been less than 1%. Already even for the 2022 budget, housing is going to receive less than 1%. In terms of the targets, when you look at the yellow book, in terms of the targets, government targets to only upgrade 1 informal settlement for the whole country. Lusaka has 37. What kind of simulations were they using in terms of calculating these targets? They also target only to build 1 house for the aged. How were these figures emerging? And how do you expect lives to be improved? And if we are talking about, we have a very youthful economy. So sometimes certain things actually provide an opportunity. So if the slum upgrading exercise had gone ahead, employment would have been created for the youths in these informal settlements. They would have participated in different activities. For instance, the issues of improving the road systems, the drainages, or probably even improving on the structures. The youths in these communities would have actually had an opportunity to access employment. But in all this that we are doing as a country, we are not only destroying the future generation, but we are also building certain challenges for ourselves. So now the slum upgrading program has failed. 70% of the population is living in the informal settlements. Most of the people that work in most of these companies and factories are coming from these informal settlements. But they are coming from homes where they do not have services. What is happening to productivity? It's certainly affected. What is happening to the future generation? It's certainly affected. The dream of certain people becoming what they want to be has also been kind of cut short. So we need to look at it from the point of holistic human development. So we cannot only have certain services that benefit a certain class of people. And when we talk about inclusive development, and you see sometimes when you look at the long-term vision, the 2030, it talks about not leaving anyone behind. Even the expiring 7th National Development Plan, it also states not leaving anyone behind. But when you look at the actuals in terms of development that we are taking to the people, it's exclusionary. There are certain populations that are not catered for. So it's really unfortunate, and we are hopeful that probably the new Dawn government could change certain things. But already we have been taken aback with the low budgetary allocation towards housing development. Because everyone comes from a form of a house. So if we cannot concentrate on making sure that we provide adequate housing, we are certainly doing injustice to the country, because we do not expect people to be productive. We also do not expect to have healthy citizens. So we'll continue to spend much more money on the health system, but failing to address the root cause, which is the poor housing situation and lack of services that these communities are actually coming from.
Very serious. I can see how passionately you talk about these issues. We really need to do something. So in case you're just joining us, we are joined in studio by Madam Grace Chikumo Mtonga, who is the Executive Director for Civic Forum on Housing and Habitat Zambia. And we are talking about the housing deficit in our country. So maybe just moving forward with our discussion. So let's talk about the national housing policy. Are we doing enough when it comes to the implementation?
Really, I wouldn't really want to offend people, but there is nothing much happening with regards to the implementation of the national housing policy. Because when you look at the 7 policy objectives, government is trying to look at provision of affordable housing for all. The question that begs answers is, where is the housing finance? Because currently, when you look at entities that actually provide housing finance, when you look at the National Building Society, when you look at National Housing Authority, these entities have to actually source for housing finance. Sometimes they source for this housing finance outside the country. It comes at a cost. And if government is not going to deliberately come in and probably say, okay, we will need to allocate this kind of amount of money towards housing development, which is going to cater for social housing, certainly the policy then it's not meeting its objectives. We have seen quite a number of housing units that have been developed for men and women in uniform. We have seen private developers also developing housing units. But you see, nobody would want to put their money in anything where they know that they will not get the return on investment. So basically, when we see the private developers developing housing units, they already have a certain target of people that they're looking at. So in terms of the off-takers of the housing developments that are actually being provided by the private sector, these are people in the middle class and the high-income earners. So definitely then what happens to the low-income earners? That's the question that begs answers. And when you look at the main policy objective or the vision of the national housing policy was to make housing affordable for everyone. But that is not what is currently obtaining. Because even in Lusaka, when you look at just the rental housing, you know, I think a Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection has tried to produce the food basket. And when you just look at the amounts, mostly now I think we have already hit the food basket is almost about 8,000 plus.
Above 8,000.
Let's look at the average salaries for majority of Zambians. Are they able to afford to live within those means? So basically, when you try to look at it from a holistic point of view, you find that the point of saying that they want to make housing access, affordable housing for all, actually the policy objective is not met. Again, we need to look at what are the factors contributing to this. I already talked about the low budgetary allocation, less than 1%. How far can it take us? Because when you look at the Ministry of Housing and Infrastructure, that has been mandated to actually spearhead the implementation of this policy. When you look at all their operations, everything is kind of falling under this budget. So when you do an analysis in terms of the operational costs, and also the costs that will actually go towards the actual development of housing, you find that probably they will not even manage to do as much as they would want to do. So already the policy implementation begins to fail. Again, the policy is looking at allocating at least over I think if my mind says me right, it's about 194,700 hectares of land should go towards development of low-cost housing development. But in the recent past, every time you wake up, there is a land issue somewhere. There is a lot of illegality, perceived corruption with the land system, and I think we've been a bit slow as a country to make sure that land is digitalized. The land audit has also taken forever to be concluded. People do not really know the land parcels that have been taken away or that have been converted from actually customary tenure to statutory tenure. So there are all these gaps when you look at the issues of land administration. And again, we also do not have a coordinated framework when it comes to issues of who administers land. We have traditional leaders who administer land. We also have their headmen and other subjects who are also administering land. We have the council on the other side. We've also got other government agencies that are into development that are also allocating land. So now what have we seen is that there have been an increase in terms of displacements of people. And again, when people are displaced, when it comes to issues of compensation, the compensations are inadequate. So sometimes people, the land where they've been cultivating, the land where they have lived for so many years, it has actually been taken away from them. So already again, when you begin to measure the successes of these policies, again, you find that we cannot really bring anything to the table to say, this is how much we have achieved from the national housing policy implementation. So there are a lot of these gray areas, and I think probably because the policy was launched in 2020 and now this is 2022, probably we would need to go back to the table and say, how far have we gone? And we need to look at it critically and say, what is it that we're supposed to begin to review? They've talked about improving the informal settlements. I already talked about it. Out of the 7 informal settlements, this is Lusaka alone. We've not talked about the informal settlements in Ndola. We've not talked about informal settlements in Kitwe. This is just Lusaka alone. And then the government targets to only upgrade 1 informal settlement. When in the national policy, government is saying they want to improve most of these informal settlements and focusing on upgrading. So already we had an upgrading strategy, it has expired. Nothing has been achieved. We have a policy, we have said it that we want to improve the informal settlements. There are no resources to facilitate this. Because any activity, for it to be effectively implemented, it has to be supported by the right resources. You have the right human resource in place. And those are some of the things that are actually even in the implementation strategy of the National Housing Policy have been recognized. We need to return staff that are trained, people that are professional in the area. So already when you try to evaluate all angles, when you try to look at the policy objectives, the policy implementation strategy, you find that really we are not even 10% in terms of achieving the set targets of the National Housing Policy.
Okay, so speaking about climate change, we have seen a number of houses that whose roofs have been blown off, and especially in these rural areas, maybe the whole house, especially those that are made from mud, the whole house has been demolished due to floods. And also, it was yesterday on the news when I heard on radio saying that about 120 families in Dola, which are currently facing diarrhea diseases due to being displaced. So maybe basically, are we on the right path to achieving decent living by 2030? And what changes should be made if we're not on the right path?
Yeah, so you see issues of housing and human settlements, they bring to the fore a number of facets. We have the planning side. So any time that housing development is starting, we need to make sure that is this housing located in an area that is suitable for human habitation. Places like Kanyama, unfortunately, it is the largest informal settlement in Lusaka. Kanyama sits on a dolomite stone. Those were spillways for water. They should not have any human settlements there. So certain water pathways have actually been blocked. And what does that lead to? Water is a mass. When the rains come, because the land surface area has got a certain natural gradient and the way water should flow, whatever lies along the water passage, it's going to be affected. So the starting point is when people are building, where are the local authorities? So we have failed as a country when it comes to issues of planning. And we need to get back to the point whereby we plan for the future. This is 2022. We cannot continue to have plans where we're just looking at the short term. We need to look at 2030. So people's houses are being blown off where they built within the acceptable standards and building codes. If that was missed, then those are the effects that we are going through. But is this the kind of stories that we are going to continue to discuss all the time? Certainly not. So we need to make sure that the planning authorities begin to do their work. Then the issue of climate change. Climate change is a human development issue. We have caused what we are experiencing. Okay? So it's how we have been playing around with the environment, and now Mother Nature is getting back to us. Okay? So the way we are planning, the way we are building, the way we are cutting down the trees. So when you look at climate change, I talked about the issue of planning. Some places, if it's a forest reserve, please let it be a forest reserve. If you want to open it up and de-gazette for development, make sure that you do not compromise the purpose for which that area was actually designed for. Lusaka already, we have places where recharge zones have actually got concrete all over. So what are the effects? In the next few years, we'll be talking about depletion of underground water. So what is happening in Ndola, it's so unfortunate. It's all because we can't adhere to planning regulations. And those are the effects. And also in terms of some of these investments, of course, I don't want to comment on issues I've not really gotten clear data about, but we have these industries that are developing. How are they managing the effluent that is coming from their, from their mines or whatever they are doing? How is it being managed? And then we have waste that is all over. Plastic is all over. And you know, plastic is actually a chemical. So some of the waste is actually finding itself in the water streams, in the rivers, and the spiral effects is that we consume this water at the end of the day. So all that is happening in terms of the environment is we have failed to plan. And because we have failed to plan, these are the consequences that we continue to encounter day in, day out.
Okay, and how do you think the response rate has been? Basically, I've done stories, for example, in Membeshi, there are about 30 families who are living in Mumbeshi Day School grounds for like over a year now, since 2021. So like, how do you think the response rate is? Maybe like, what kind of dangers are these people exposed to? So they're living in tents. They've been living in tents for over 1 year now, and these are like 30 families that are sharing 4 toilets. Not 30 people, but 30 families sharing 4 toilets. So maybe what kind of reaction would you like to see from government in such cases? So these people were actually displaced from their land after the same land wrangles where maybe 2 people have got same title deeds for the land and all that. So maybe how should the response rate be to safeguard people's livelihoods?
I think when you look at all the communities, we've got our civic leaders that are in these communities. And basically they exist because they have a duty to save the communities that elected them into power. So we want to see a situation whereby the civic leaders are actually held accountable, but also as citizens, they need to also understand what are their entitlements and human rights. Already you cannot have 30 families, because if you take 30 families and you're looking at probably one household that's got 6 people, so you're talking about maybe over 180 people sharing 4 toilets. It's basically inhygienic, and now we're in the COVID era. So we need to rethink and I think become more innovative. Certainly when you put people in a tent, there are a lot of dangers that you're actually exposing people to. People need privacy because there are issues of mental health now. People are in a crowded place. There are children. What happens to their future? So I think we need to get to a point where we begin to plan much more ahead, even for disasters. Yeah, so we have developed what we are calling the Urban Planning and Housing Observatory. It's something that we'll be actually piloting for Lusaka first to see how it works. We would want citizens to actually interact much more with their civic leaders. You cannot keep people in one place for 12 months. You don't really have a plan for them. That is actually putting people on a death trap, because if a disease breaks out in this small community, you are exposing over 180 people, 80 lives to high risk. So basically in terms of response rates, we would want it to be within the shortest possible time. We have the academia, and I've always wanted to look for solutions outside the country. We have the academia, we have brains in Zambia, okay? We are promoting the low-cost housing development using the alternative building methods. We are using available local materials. When people are in these tents, what other resources? Let's move away from handouts. Can we give people skills that they can survive with? So we are looking at a situation whereby, yes, these people are in tents. Can they find land for them? Can we move them, train them on what to do? We have TDAU at UNZA. We have the School of Built Environment at CBU. Can we make use of the students so that they can work with these communities, build them decent, sustainable shelter? Because tents are temporal. They are going to start wearing out soon. Are you going to continue giving them tents? So we need to start looking at long-lasting solutions than temporal solutions. And you take people millennial. Then what if the millennial finishes? So we need to start looking at long-term sustainable measures. Yeah.
That is very interesting, Madam Tonga there. So maybe what are some of the interventions your project is implementing and complementing the government in resolving housing challenges?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, under the 3 pillars, so we do have housing cooperatives that we work with, and these we train them in different areas. So we train them on alternative building methods. We actually train them on enterprise development. We also try to link them to different financial institutions, and climate change is now becoming the in thing, so we train them to be aware about climate change issues. We also try to create partnerships with government. So recently in Chadiza, the Ministry of Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development actually built a house for Chadiza Housing Cooperative. We did a house also in Lumwana for the police. And we've continued to support our youths with artisan skills, where we are training them in different building methods and technologies. Other than that, we are also trying to facilitate effective engagements between civic leaders and community members. So we developed what we are calling the Urban Planning and Housing Observatory, which we launched on the 20th of December, 2021. So the Urban Planning and Housing Observatory will actually be a platform. So we'll have citizens reporting in, and citizens also being able to provide what they think would be the solution. And the purpose of this urban planning and housing observatory is basically not to leave anyone behind. We want to make sure that all the corners of Zambia are able to participate. We are already building up a database for all the councillors or the provincial planning heads, such that when an issue is logged in, we'll be able to contact the relevant authorities and hope to see a solution coming forth almost immediately. Then other than that, we've continued with our dialogues and also facilitating engagements, conducting our surveys, because we believe in facts-based advocacy. So we do conduct surveys on the status of housing, where we recommend to different local authorities and service providers on what needs to be done better. So we still believe in partnerships as well. So still partnering. We've done quite a number of other developmental projects with different partners with the aim of building the skills for the youth and also economic empowerment for our target women.
Interesting, the Civic Forum for Housing and Habitat Zambia, and we were speaking to the Executive Director, Madam Grace Mtonga, who was just explaining the kind of situation we are in with regards to housing in Zambia, and a lot of important things have been said. I hope our government was listening. I hope our government was listening, and I hope other stakeholders, I hope the general public have learned something on how they can contact the forum in order to provide solutions that are going to enable the current housing deficit and challenges that are faced in our country to be sorted. We know, as I said earlier, Madam, to say, I was speaking to a colleague of mine last week, was telling me, you know, we covered a house where about 12 people live in a one-roomed house. So I was asking to say, how do they sleep? How does a husband and wife sleep in the same room with children, grandchildren, elderly people? But all these maybe have been necessitated by the fact that we do not have proper housing shelters for those who are in low-income situations. What we see is government does build houses for men in uniform and stuff like that. I think of late government has done a lot of that. But what of other sectors? What of houses for nurses, for doctors, for teachers, even for an ordinary person like me? These are the questions that a lot of people have been asking. Maybe just to conclude the program, what are your concluding remarks with regards to our topic today?
Yeah, so housing is actually a fundamental human right. So when you don't provide housing and the absence of social housing in Zambia, this is what has led to the proliferation of informal settlements, because it's an inherent right. So people will house themselves regardless. But it's the kind and status of housing. Then we also know that a human being has got a certain culture that defines them. And once that culture is actually violated, you create another entity of a human being. So we are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And I think adequate housing could be one of the solutions. We are dealing with issues of defilement, issues of incest, because the girl child is living in an insecure house. An aged woman who lives alone, she's not adequately protected. She's actually becomes a victim to people who would want to abuse her. So really at the end of it all, housing cuts across all sectors. If we want a healthy nation, certainly we need to first provide adequate housing. If we need a productive country, we first need to provide adequate housing. If we need to protect our girl child and our women out there, we need adequate housing. So social housing cannot be left to people, cannot be left out of government's priority plans. And now that the CDF has been increased, it is our desire to see how the members of parliament can actually become much more innovative and see how they can allocate part of the CDF towards provision of social housing. Because basically housing is an inherent right, and we cannot only leave it to the private sector to provide housing. We would also want to see government somehow provide social housing for the marginalized, and really a target of one house in a year, it's unacceptable. I think we need to go back and review our plans and also how we allocate resources. Housing is the core to development.
Okay, that was very interesting. So earlier we were joined by Mr. KANYAMA discussing what impact the war between Ukraine and Russia has on Zambia's economy. We have learned a lot, and it's also given a number of solutions. And then we were joined by Madam Grace Mtonga talking about the housing situation in Zambia, and we have also learned a lot, and there's a lot for the UPND government to do in order to secure housing for Zambia's population, especially if we are to achieve 2030 goals of decent living. So join us tomorrow on The Breakfast Show. Do tune in to Camnet TV. But from us, it's good morning.